Hi, this is a foreigner in the Philippines. Had a conversation very recently about how behavior affects us, about how it affects the way that we walk through our lives every day on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that came up during that time was about mending the brake. And I had questions that were put to me, statements that were made about, well, if something happened to me, like happened to you with the book, I lost a book, but I loaned it to someone, and then they said that it had been given rather than loaned. And one person said, I wouldn't have forgiven that. I would have moved on. I'd never have trusted him again, and that would be it. That would be finished. And it reminded me of a similar situation where someone did something here at our hilltop home, and someone came in and they really broke the rules of privacy, and they didn't respect our privacy, mine in particular. And because I'm a foreigner, and foreigners tend to revel in attributing or sharing out or pinpointing blame. Somebody has to take the blame. Who is going to be held accountable for this? And that's really how we are until we learn differently. Now, so when this person broke the rules, I cut that person out of my life. I actually met them on the way. I said, you are no longer my friend. You were asked not to do what you did, and I don't want you. You're not my friend. That's it. My mother-in-law, who is a born-again Christian, didn't do that. She continued to accept the person as a friend and a neighbour, to welcome her into the house, to extend the same hospitality that she had always done. And contrary to me, who lost a friend, she didn't. So, same incident, but a different way of behaving according to that, in response to that incident, right? So, who's right? Well, now time has healed whatever it was that I wanted to share in terms of blame, and I'm friends with that person. My mother-in-law was always friends with that person. She never stopped. She forgave the person straight away, without the time clause. Oh, well, time will heal, or maybe it won't. There is something to be learned by that. I was wrong. I responded in an egotistical way, in a non-proactive way. I didn't take control and say, wait a minute, how important is this? Why don't I just admonish the person, say that I'm very disappointed, let them say sorry, and then move on? Well, I didn't do that. But I realise now that my mother-in-law was showing me, by her good example, how I should have behaved on that. So, what did I learn on that? Well, day before yesterday, or was it even yesterday? The days mean nothing to me now. I went to have a haircut, and I had to wait about, I don't know, an hour and a half to have a haircut, because the barbershop was full. Now, it obviously was full of Filipinos. That's the nature of living in the Philippines. The damn place is full of Filipinos. So I went in, and I don't speak the language. The barber doesn't speak the language, doesn't speak my language, and I waited patiently. And I waited, and I had a pretty rough idea of how many people were in front of me, and it got to where it was my turn. Well, when I stood up, when the man got out of the chair, I stood up, and at exactly the same time the man standing next to me stood up. And I said, well, it's my turn. And the barber shook his head like this and pointed to the man. And the man smiled at me, very friendly, young guy, and said, it's my turn. So I said, okay. Now I'd realised that something was going to come up, and in my blame mode I worked out, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to argue this, and it's my turn. Am I going to wait another 10 or 15 minutes, or am I going to insist that it's my turn? Well, what would be an amicable way to handle this? And I thought, why don't I suggest tossing a coin, heads or tails? How would I do that? I don't speak the language. Well, suddenly the man's finished cutting the hair of the man in front of me, the man that was in the chair, and we all stood up. So I didn't do any of that, and I didn't do what was on my fight or flight program and walk out in a huff. I sat back down again, and I really thought about it, and I thought, I'm not sure how many brown Filipino faces were in front of me. So why does this man think he's in front of me? Well, I'm a foreigner, and I walked in with Balalut, a 10-year-old Filipino kid, and we both sat down together. What's the chances of that man knowing that he's in front of me? I don't think that he would forget that he was in front of the only foreigner in the barber shop. I don't think that the barber would not know his customers, and the stranger, the old foreigner, I don't think that anybody would mistake that. And so I logically worked it out, and I felt fine about it. I worked it out so that I did feel fine about it, and when the other man had had his hair cut, the barber looked at me and said, "You, ikaw." And I got up, and the barber gave me a good haircut that I was very happy with, and I paid him nearly double by way of a tip, and everybody was happy. Now, it's one of those situations where if I'd allowed the ego to take precedence, if I'd allowed my determination to be right govern all of my actions, I'd have had a very unpleasant time. I probably wouldn't have got my turn out of turn, and I wouldn't be going back to that barber shop again, would I? No, I wouldn't. And I would have gone away, and I wouldn't have had a haircut, and I'd have wasted nearly an hour and a half waiting for a haircut that I never got, and it would have been to nobody's advantage. Whereas now I will go back to that hairdresser because he was good. I watched him do 6 or 7 or 8 haircuts, expertly, fast, giving exactly what the customer wanted, smiling face at the end of every haircut, and he moved on to the next one, and he was good. So I will go back there, but next time I will make sure that there's only a couple of people who are waiting, So, behaviour. It's important that we learn to be able to control those feelings where we have to be right. And the ego is there as a mechanism to make sure that we are always right. And often it does that by making other people wrong to make ourselves right. And it's a little mechanism that we all have, or in computer speak or cell phone speak, it's an app. And it's an app that often doesn't serve us very well. So we need to look at how we behave on that. So this was just a little pointer. Perhaps there is one other thing that I should mention. When we talked a couple of videos ago about apologizing, and I mentioned that the only rule, or the one of only two rules that when I was a single parent, my kid and I had, was that you couldn't refuse a sorry. And we're really talking about the behavior of good relations, because sooner or later we all do things wrong and we need to apologize. Not you and me, of course, present company accepted. You and I would never do anything wrong, would we? But there are other people, mere mortals, who do all kinds of things wrong. So, how about that sorry? So somebody's done something and you are hurt. Well, how hurt are you? Are you really hurt? Maybe you are. Maybe this something that the other person did was a monumental wrong against you. Maybe it cost you a great deal of money. Maybe it cost you your car. Maybe the guy borrowed it and wrecked your car, and it was your favourite car, and a vintage car that you couldn't replace easily. Who knows? Something that really, really hurt. Maybe it was a betrayal that was going to be difficult for you to forgive. Right, here's where the sorry comes in. Now, if you're walking past someone and you accidentally bump into him, how big a sorry do you have to do? It's a very small one, isn't it? Oh, sorry, sir. And then you walk on, and the man is appeased and everybody's happy. What happens if you push in front of somebody, like we've just been talking about, and you try to get in front of him? Well, that's a little bit of a bigger sorry that we're talking about now. Look, I'm sorry, it's just that I was in a hurry and I was hoping you'd let me go, but I'm sorry, please go ahead. That's a bigger sorry than the, oh, sorry sir. Now, if it's a betrayal, what do? You have to get the person and say, listen, can we talk? Can you just listen? I know I did that wrong. I know that whatever it is probably will affect our friendship. And what do? You give the man, the woman, an apology that is proportional to the offence. In other words, the little trip over is a tiny thing that you did. You just tripped. It was an accident. You say, sorry. And then the other one, where you try to bump in, look, I'm sorry, I was in a hurry. I hope you don't mind. You understand. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're next. And then there's the betrayal. That's when you have to really think about how you are going to make up for that. So in among your sorry for a big crime, you have to work out how you're going to make up. So you're going to have to come up with some way of getting their agreement on how you're going to get over this. And perhaps you might consider that you are going to say something like, can I speak to you? is it possible for you to listen to me? And if you can get his agreement to do that, her agreement to do that, then you have to go over the hurt. I know I did wrong. I'm trying really hard to make up for that. Can you tell me, what would it take for you to be able to forgive me? And you may have to come up with something that is as humble as that, if not more so. And if you can get the person to agree to give you a way of getting over it, now you're going to have to do what the good old Catholics called paying penance. When I was a kid, when I had to go into confession, I would invite some or invent some sin that I could confess to and say, oh well, yes, I'm very sorry, Father, but I was cheeky to my mother. And he says, oh, Terence, that is terrible. And then he would give me 10 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers, and I'd have to go out and I'd have to go, Our Father who art in heaven, and I'd rush through the 10 and the 10, and I'd do my penance. So, if you are sincerely trying to make up for what you did with your apology, expect to do penance, and expect to do it in a sincere way, with honesty, and by changing the way that you behave according to that person. And that also may include understanding the extent of the wound. So a little tiny cut on the finger, just put a band-aid on it. If it's a deeper wound, you keep the band-aid on it for a longer time. And if it's a deep cut, it needs to have a dressing on it. And before the dressing goes on, it needs to be stitched up. And it needs to have some attention. And it has to have attention on a daily basis to keep it from getting infected. And that's really almost what, say, a betrayal would be, that it can get infected. So there's a very careful assessment that has to take place on a daily basis, where you have to decide whether what you have done so far is going to be enough. And how much is enough? How much is it going to take to get your friend back? And how much is it worth? How much is it worth to get his or her friendship back? How much is it worth to realize that you cannot do this kind of thing if you wish to live an honest, upright, ethical life? And that's really what you're looking at doing. The apology is just the first step to changing your behavior, making some kind of amends, making up for what you did, is your self-punishment, where you agree that you're going to do a little time, and waiting until the other person feels better is not so hard if you put yourself in that person's place and you say to yourself, would I feel better by this time? And then you allow a little bit more and do a little bit more in order to heal the breach. Now, my wife says that on certain things, she equates it to a cracked mirror. Once the mirror is cracked, you can put it back together again, but it's always cracked. I differ very slightly on this because I look at it this way. If the person that you offended, betrayed, hurt, sees that you really changed toward them sincerely, he may see that, she may see that as a positive thing, and not only forgive you, but admire you for your humility and courage. And that would be what you would be heading for. That's what you would be trying for. But right in among that is no losing your patience. No saying, hell, how long do I have to? No, you can't do that. If you really did wrong and you really were in the wrong, then do your time. After you've done your time, if it really doesn't repair, then you have to walk away. But there's a whole load of stuff that you have to do before that. And one of the things that you have to look at is, in fact, and we dealt with this on the last video about saying sorry, one of the things that you're going to have to look at is whether you are enabling that other person to punish unfairly. And that's even written into man's law, not just God's law, into man's law. There is a degree of punishment which is equal to the crime. And if the other person has any kind of a sense of fairness, they will not try to take you, to humble you further than that point. And that's what you have to look for. So, good luck on that. And I'd love to hear from you. If ever you have any comments about this and want to private message me, always very happy to hear from you. This is a foreigner in the Philippines, and talk to you soon. Bye.